Welcome to Ask a Pastor. This is something we've been doing just to address questions from a variety of people, and if you have questions, please feel free to send them to askapastor@orchardhillchurch.com, and we will be happy to address those in a coming episode. Some of you get this by podcast, some on radio, some Facebook, Instagram. I think there's some other deliverables as well, but we're glad that you've taken a few minutes to just make this part of your day. And today I'm joined by Kay Warheit. Kay is part of our Butler campus. She directs the women's ministries in Butler for our campus there, and has before that been part of the staff at Orchard Hill Wexford for a long time. So Kay, welcome.
Thank you.
And today we're going to jump into just a few questions. Here's the first question. It says, I'm a 57-year-old man. I've been attending Orchard Hill for a little over a year now. I love it, I enjoy it, and I've learned so much about myself. I've been shown a lot about how I need to change things about myself. And then he says this, why is it so hard to become less self-centered and selfish? This has been one of the biggest struggles for me. So the question I think that's embedded in that is why is it so hard to change, and how can I change?
First of all, it is a wonderful thing to realize that you are self-centered. I think you can spend a lifetime trying to be good, but when it comes to the core and realize that it isn't about me, or I do spend a lot of time worrying about me, or worrying about my image, or am I good enough, it's a real blessing to come to the point, even though it's very painful. And it is like putting a magnifying glass up to your own personality and seeing, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was my focus. I didn't realize how mean or snarky I can be. And I think it's, years ago I heard a young man talk about Matthew 12, where it talks about the story of the swept clean and left empty. A house was rid of an evil spirit and then left empty. And I think sometimes we can do that with realizing I need to get rid of myself, I need to get rid of my own focus, I need to get rid of my lifestyle, and then what? And then you can implode and think, if I just obey the rules, if I just do this right. And it's really more a focus on what can I do for God? How can I serve Him? And that comes with, instead of thinking about yourself, it comes with life group, community, reading the Word, not just dwelling on, why am I like this? And I think you said a few weeks ago, it actually gets harder as you get older. And I find that with myself. I look at Scripture and I think, especially we're looking at James and judging other people. And I might not say anything, I might look pretty good, but in my thoughts, why would they wear that? Why would they get that tattoo? I'm judging. And instead it's, God, what do you want me to say to this person? How can I be praying for this person while I'm standing here, sitting here? It becomes more about what do you want, God, rather than I need to make sure that people are okay with me, that self-centered. So again, it is a painful thing to realize how self-centered you are. It only gets worse the closer you get to God, because it is His light shining on you, seeing things that you had never maybe seen before, and it is a real blessing to be able to change in Him.
Yeah, change is an interesting concept, because it seems to me that we don't really change until we really want to change.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is we may think we want to change, but until we actually either hurt so much because of something that's happened that we say, I need to change, or we grow so much, or we have a new vision for what we can be, what we do is we say, oh, it'd be nice to change. I mean, the proverbial kind of example of this is dieting. I mean, how many of us will say, oh yeah, I should diet. And then we look at the mirror and we go, I should, but it's not that bad. And then we don't.
Right.
Until either we hit a point where our doctor tells us we need to do something, or it's going to have, some kind of an impact on us, or we have some event or something, have some new vision. And so when it comes to spiritual change, what seems to make that challenging is it seems to me, just having experienced this personally, watched it as a pastor for a lot of years, is we go in cycles, meaning we'll have a season where it's like, oh, I really want to change, I really want to address this. And then we'll have the motivation, and maybe we'll take some really positive steps, and then something will happen, and maybe we get distracted, something else comes up, and all of a sudden we don't sustain the effort in that one area,
Right.
maybe the way that we started down the path to do. And so the other thing that I think makes change really hard is, in a Christian arena, is there are so many areas that need to be addressed. Like when I read my Bible, I'm just overwhelmed at times by it's like I have so far to go in so many areas. I don't know that I can change that much. And so it's there's a little bit of a where do I even start in that. So if somebody came to you and was overwhelmed, just saying, okay, I realize, I think you said it, the further I go in the Christian life, the more I realize I still have a ways to go. What would you say if somebody's really kind of in that overwhelmed space of saying there's just so many places I'd like to experience change and I haven't? How would you encourage them to go about that?
Well, I've actually, one-on-one mentoring with someone to just start that long trek to changing. It might be studying the Bible together. It might be an accountability partner. But it has to be, just like with dieting, I have to be accountable. I have to want to, and then it helps to have someone, Christian accountability or iron sharpens iron. It's let me just step by step. And then out of that comes an understanding that it's not quite so big. It's just one day at a time, asking God, I don't know how to change, help me change. I would say one-on-one mentoring, of course, regular attendance on Sundays when you feel like it's overwhelming. Maybe there's one thing I can hear today, or maybe the change isn't going to happen because of this message, but if there's something I can do to just discipline myself. I really feel the books you read, the company you keep, maybe not listening to Christian radio, Christian music's for everybody, but whatever you can to just soak yourself. Again, you count calories like you said with dieting, or you make sure you have someone, call me, make sure. That accountability needs to take place. And that's what I would say. I would meet with someone or find someone.
Yeah. If you listen to me on weekends, I'm going to use this story at some point in the future. But the other day, I had a friend invite me to Pitt basketball's practice, and I'm a basketball fan, so I like that kind of thing. So I got a chance to go watch them practice. And these are Division I basketball players, big-time athletes. And what struck me about it was that they're doing the same drills that kids do when they're in fifth grade and starting to learn the game, and that they drilled things that were beyond fifth graders, but what they drilled, you saw the student athletes doing these really complex things, but they broke it down so that when they were in games and high pressure situations, it was an instinctive response, and you could really see that. And I had a moment where just watching that, I thought, that is what you want to do in character formation. You have to go back to some of the basics and say, what is it that will be significant for me? But then to put yourself in a place where what you're doing is saying, I'm responding when I can to this in a certain way, so that when I'm in a place that's harder down the road, I'll have an instinctive response. So take something like selfishness, which being self-centered. So maybe it's learning some scripture, whatever, around selfishness, taking your eyes off yourself, basic. But then where can I practice not being selfish so that when I'm in a place where I'm going to have that, I've developed some muscle and some what does it feel like to give of myself? And so, it might be something really simple, like saying I'm going to take the least kind of glamorous chore of the house, and I'm just going to start doing that because it's a way to just actively say I'm practicing being selfless rather than selfish. And it's interesting, and obviously there's a lot of other things we could say about that, but I just thought that analogy was interesting, just the breaking it down to little things, basic things over and over again, so that when you're in the big moment, then you have the internal reaction to that. So, okay, here's a question, and this is something people have talked about for years, and that is, what is the perspective that a Christian should have on abortion?
Well, the automatic answer is, or the go-to is the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not murder. And that is not something the world can comprehend when it's, First and Second Corinthians both have a scripture, your body is your temple. And you say, well, it's my body, I can do what I want, and I have a right. And I remember struggling with the Garden of Eden and how they put God second. They broke the first commandment. They wanted their own way. And they were banished from the garden. And I didn't understand how that seems so harsh, but nobody can tell you. The law has been given not to make life good, but the law has been given so that you are not banished from the good life God wanted. Nobody can tell you the memories that you have. If you slander someone, you can't take those words back. If you scream at your parents and disrespect, you can't take that back. You steal, you always have that memory. When you take the life of an unborn child, you cannot go back and undo that memory. That haunts you, and that law is there for you to understand. You step outside that law, that good life is taken from you.
Okay, I want to just come back to the beginning for a second of what you said. You said the go-to is the Ten Commandments, you shall not murder. There are people who would be of faith who would say, in fact, whole churches that kind of would say, hey, we're pro-choice, because they would say it's not murder until the baby is born. It's still part of the mother's body in conception. So why would you say so almost matter-of-factly, hey, this is the go-to, this is the way I see it, when there are clearly others, even people of faith, who would say, that's still up for debate. How would you respond? And the reason I want to push on this is I'm assuming that there's at least some people who listen to this that wouldn't just say, oh, the Ten Commandments says it, that settles it, that would say, you know what, there's more to it than that.
Well, and even the laws are confusing. I mean, you can have a woman decide to have an abortion, and then you have a drunk driver hit a woman who's pregnant, and it's double murder. The law is confusing, and you can see why people are confused.
We'll abort a baby in one wing of a hospital and then fight to save the same baby's life down the hall.
Even removing the baby to take, surgical matters in their own hands, and then putting the baby, that they treat it as a life. So I feel that it is confusing, but the medical world will, bottom line, consider it a life, even though they'll say it's not a life, it's just a fetus. So I do feel for those who, again, it's the company you keep, or the understanding that it's okay to do what you want. It doesn't matter. But I stress, with all 10 commandments, nobody tells you what can haunt you, what can take away the life that you think won't bother me. This is just for now. But in years to come, you will understand that this was not right. This was not meant to be. Okay.
Yeah, the argument typically from a biblical standpoint is that people would go to passages like Psalm 139 and talk about being knit together in God's womb, and how God knew us before the physical birth, as soon as we were conceived. And I realize that for some they'd say, well, that still doesn't decide the issue. And in some ways, I don't know that the issue has to be decided on those grounds. And the reason I say that is I think the concept of life, potential life, is still something that if you take that away, you are still acting in a way that is determining the course of a future life. And so however you want to define those terms, there's still something there. And one of the arguments that I've made about this that I think is interesting is any nation that doesn't continue to care for its young, ultimately that nation ends up falling. and both politically, economically, militarily, every way. And I realize people would say, well, the sovereignty is over your own body, and we don't care about the nation, we don't care about any of those things. This is that person's choice. But in making that choice, you're taking away a lifetime of choices of another individual. And that's why I say I don't know that it has to be resolved there, although that's where people tend to go, is to try to argue the when is it life, when is it not life. One of the things that was most compelling to me about this was years ago I went to the the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. It's right by the University of Chicago, geographically. And they used to have an embryo display where they had one for every week of a woman's pregnancy, where you could see an embryo. And I remember just walking through that, and it was so jarring to see how early the baby appears to be human, and I would think it would be challenging, but it's a hard issue, and certainly if you're a person who's had an abortion, it is something that I can't imagine kind of the emotion. I'm sure there would be times of saying I want to justify what I've done, or maybe I don't feel good about what I've done, but like anything in our Christian experience or in life, there's grace, there's a God who loves us more than the decisions that we make. And so that's a place that I come to from time to time. But I do think it's important that the Christian church doesn't just cede on this issue. And even though there's churches that would say, hey, we see it completely the opposite way, to me this is one of those issues where you say, no, we believe that there is life here, and that just like the church should care about all lives, should care about the unborn as well. Kay, any other thoughts on that issue? What would you say to somebody who has had an abortion? What words of wisdom would you give to somebody?
Well, that through Christ, there is forgiveness, there is life, and there is a way to give hope to others through your experience, to not stop there, to go on, and to understand the magnitude of God's grace once again.
Okay. Here's another question that we have. My daughter has started using, I assume that's referring to using substances, and will not respond to my challenges to stop. What would you recommend as a next step? So I'm assuming this situation is a parent who says, our daughter has started kind of using some stuff. We know she is. We've challenged her, but she continues despite our pleas to stop. What would you say to a parent who's in that situation?
First of all, you're the parent, and you are in charge. And secondly, it's not about you. It's not for you to be your child's friend at this time. You are the parent. And it's no different if you found out your child had cancer. You would go out of your way to get the best treatment. You would go out of your way to change your life, your schedule, to accommodate this healing and to get the best treatment you can. To me, it is no different. When you start with drugs, it's no different than finding out your child has cancer. You need to go out of your way. You need to be the parent in shutting down your child. It sounds harsh, but it's not.
What do you mean by shutting down?
The avenues for them to get that drug, if it's friends, if it's social media, taking their phone, taking their lifestyle. I had heard years ago on the radio that a teenager's mind is very similar to that of a 3-year-old. And in that it's me, about me, my way, I want what I want. You can't tell me what to do. And I think we fool ourselves into thinking that I want to be my child's friend. I don't want them to not love me. But you would never leave a 3-year-old alone at the mall. You would never leave a 3-year-old home alone. And when your child has made the decision to take drugs, you treat them like a 3-year-old in many ways, which sounds very harsh. But this is drugs. This is a matter of life or death. And drugs are not, let me try this once. They can be very frightening and down a path where they lose their life. And I just tell anybody who says, I think my child's doing drugs, well, you're probably right. They probably are. If you think that, and Dr. Dobson said years ago, nobody is going to love your child as much as you do. So you can't go to other parents and ask for help. You can certainly try, but the point is, it's you and God. You are accountable, and this kid. And hopefully you're on the same page with your spouse. But you do whatever it takes to stop that drug flow, because you can't just urge, plead, beg. If they've already tried, that becomes offensive to them, and they will sneak and try and find ways.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with a mind that is not maybe be able to reason.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason that it's referred to as drug addiction.
Yeah.
Is the drugs do feed an addiction.
Yeah.
And whether that's disease that was inborn or an appetite that's developed is secondary to the fact that unchecked, that addiction will lead somebody to a place that they don't want to be, you don't want them to be. And so having been around people long enough, I've seen the devastation. And so I think what I would say to a parent who is facing that is, I would agree with what you said. There's nothing that I wouldn't do to try to separate them from the environment. If you have to move out of state, do whatever it takes to get them away from whatever is drawing them into it, if you have to. But I would also say, go and find some people who have dealt with this, meaning other parents.
Yes.
Hear their wisdom. What I have heard from parents who've dealt with this is, a very resigned position often of saying, I didn't know what to do. And sometimes they say, I wish I had done more. Sometimes they say, maybe that wasn't the approach. But certainly if the child is still in your home, you still have the potential to shape something, then I would say, find any method to deal with it as quickly and as early as possible. And I think what you said, if you suspect something, don't sit on it, because that's probably your best opportunity to change the course is early. The longer it goes, the harder it is to deal with and to effectively change. And I really do believe that this is one of the great spiritual battles even of our day, is that's a way to destroy lives, families, from God's best for them, is to get them down this path. And so, are you aware of any resources that you would direct somebody to, from just saying, here's a resource that might be helpful right away?
Well, like you said, there are support groups that we have at the church. Mm-hmm. You absolutely, as a parent, need support because you think you're losing your mind, and you need to hear, as you said, how other people are dealing, and in ways that you never might have thought. And when you're taking that away from your child, you're shutting them down, then you need, again, to fill in.
Right.
What are you going to do while they sit at home? Can you be a creative parent? And reaching out, like you said, to other parents. There is a paranoia that comes with everybody knows, and what do they think of me? You can't go there. You have to just address this child and ask God to save them. It helps. Yeah. It's hard if you're a single parent. It helps if you're on the same page with your spouse.
Okay, thank you. We'll need to leave it here. Again, send questions to askapastor@orchardhillchurch.com. We'll be happy to address those in coming broadcasts.